Hello and welcome to Exchanges for another week. How do you grow your wealth, particularly when your upbringing, your beliefs, your social standing, your understanding of money, your movement around the perception of what wealth actually is, all impacts the thought process that has to actually getting you towards an autonomy that you want to achieve. So how do you grow that? That is where the next guest in Exchanges comes along. Jessica Brady is a foremost expert in this space. She's written a fantastic new book called Grow, and it is all around how you grow your wealth. Before we get into Jess and what she has to say in this amazing exchange, we are sponsored by More. More is a lifestyle by design app designed for all property investors out there to get everything you need to design, extract, and move your property portfolio the way that you want to do it for a lifestyle by design. That's more, moorr.com.au to find out more. But for now, here's Jess and her exchange. Jess Brady, welcome to Exchanges. First and foremost, I know those that aren't watching this won't be able to understand it, but I'm holding up your fantastic book, Get Growing. Congratulations on it. We were speaking off air just about how open you've been in this book about your personal situation. Take me through the first couple of chapters, because I love how you talk about it from, your own, you clearly like gardening, with regards to where you are. But take me through those first two chapters in particular, which is your dirt and your roots, the roots of where you come from, the dirt of what the system has done to really, constrain those in middle and lower socioeconomic groups.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having me. So yeah, Get Growing has the most amount of gardening and nature metaphors fit into a finance book, I think, possible. I think if there was an award for that, I'd be winning, gold stars all round. But I think if you read the book, you understand sort of the sequencing and why I've kind of gone where I've gone. And to be perfectly honest, so the first chapter is called Roots, and it's my background on money. And having been in the money world for, it's actually 2 decades next month, I've read goodness knows how many money books. And sometimes you just feel like, gosh, these people must have, a perfect life and they must have done everything perfectly. And maybe they've just come from money. And so they don't really understand how I feel or the mistakes that I've made. Like, it must be easier for you. And a big thing for me was to break down those barriers and say, actually, like, I want you to know I'm right there with you. I did not come from intergenerational wealth. God, how I wish I did. And it was quite a vulnerable moment. Like, there were moments when I was writing the chapter about my own story where I was like, am I really ready to share this with the world? Like, there would be people who I've worked with for years and years who don't know anything about, the stuff that I've put in that book. And then I thought, if I'm going to ask people to be incredibly vulnerable with themselves and look in and search for lessons and insights, then I want them to know that I'm prepared to do that with them on this journey as well. So yeah, look, I try to do it in a way that is fun, funny, probably more than fun, and honest and raw and vulnerable. And it was interesting when I was working with the publishers, they were like, oh, we don't think we need your story. And then when I gave them the chapter, they were like, this needs to stay in. This absolutely is like a really pivotal part of the book. And so the second chapter, which is Dirt, and can I just say, Evan, I could have written an entire book. I could write a series of books if I had the mental bandwidth, which I absolutely don't, just on that chapter. And so what I looked at was really the dirty side of money, how money and power and systems and laws and people in charge have made decisions and systems that work really well for people who have money. And frankly, they don't work well at all. In fact, there are laws that were created to systematically keep people out of the money world. And whilst we have moved on theoretically from that, what I wanted to show people was this isn't as far back as you think. This is still going on in certain areas of the world, lots of areas of the world, but it still impacts us because for too long, what we've told people is if you don't have huge levels of success and wealth, that's on you. That's your fault. You've done that to you because if you wanted it, you could have grabbed it with both hands and got it. And what Dirt as a chapter shows is it's not quite as simple as that.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree. What you just talked about there is the incentive, right? So people in power, once they're in power, the incentive is too easy to touch. We've gone through royal commissions across the world. We've gone royal commissions here. And, you look at policy that's been put in by all color governments across all parts of the world. It it is around the incentive is too easy to touch and therefore moving that way. The other thing you highlighted there is ambition is probably the way I would normally describe what you talk about there. Whereas, if you were more ambitious, you'd get ahead. Ambition is actually not something I like to talk about because I actually think it loses perspective. It doesn't have it. Aspiration, that's different. But ambition, which is really what I sort of took out of your dirt chapter, where, you talk heavily around, if you worked hard, you'll get ahead. It's not that simple in terms of where it is. So I think what I then wanted to go in further is first let's go into that a bit further. Let's talk about the fact that you don't have the bandwidth, but I know you do because I've seen you post about it, which is if you were able to change some of those systems, what would you change first?
God, if I could have that magic wand for just give me an hour, just give me an hour and I could do some serious damage. I think if we talk about the
Serious good,
context
mate.
of what was that?
Serious good, not serious damage. Keep going.
Serious good, serious good. That is so true. If we talk about where we're at today and the landscape of Australia, which is where I live, and what I am seeing is we're at a junction point in my mind around huge wealth inequality. We've already got wealth inequality. And in fact, that chapter does, I think, an all right job of showing how long we've had it, particularly through a gendered lens, particularly if you are a person with disabilities, if you are a migrant, there's all of these compounding and cumulative factors that help put you behind the starting blocks. But I think if we're talking about, wealth and wealth inequality, I fear and feel that the divide is going to become so much wider really quickly if we don't do something about it. So if I could change anything, it would be how we tax wealth over work in Australia today. I think about generations gone by and, the rhetoric that's online is, oh, well, we did it and we had double-digit interest rates and we survived. And I'm like, it would have been bloody awful. But my mum was a nurse and my dad was a bus driver. And at one point in time, they had 3 kids and 3 properties. You tell me how a bus driver and a nurse today with 3 kids would be able to even possibly manage rent. And so, I think about the biggest cost for most Aussies, the biggest fear for most Aussies. I think about, what leads to long-term poverty risk. It is all around home ownership. And so if I could do one thing, it would be fixing wealth inequality. It would be giving people the right to have a home that they live in. And with our house to price ratios as they are, and I know you've just interviewed, I saw some of the work that you did with Eliza Owens, who I love, and I've done some work with her in the past. If I could do one thing, I think that would be, I think it's so necessary because what I am really worried about is if we don't do anything, the lottery of life and whether your parents had wealth is going to be such a big predictor of whether you can have a roof over your head that you own. I just don't think that is fair.
It's not fair. So, I mean, I've just done some stuff with the ABC on this, which is basically the size of your parents' balance sheet shouldn't govern how you move in your daily life. I'm going to push a bit further on it because my question obviously comes straight away. Is it movement on, CGT, so the capital gains tax? Is it movements on negative gearing? But is it also movements on personal income tax across the whole tax brackets? Everybody talks about the lower group, but it's also, in my view, about the top tax bracket. We just spoke about before about aspiration, etc. Do you see that as how you partly answer this question, which is it has to be not just holistic, but also across all groups, including groups that sometimes would be argued as wealthy, but in this day and age not necessarily are?
Yeah, look, I think it does need to be a whole of system review. I mean, I just did a podcast last week, which was sort of my hot takes on the recent white paper that Allegra Spender has just put out. And I looked at what the objectives of those white papers were, and then I looked at what the kind of crux of the white paper was, and I was like, guys, we're tinkering at the edges here. Everyone loves the idea of a tax cut, and this is going to give $1,643 of relief to the average Aussie, and I'm like, woo! We'll all just go out and buy a home and live happily ever after. I think we need to think about, okay, well, what do we want to do from a structural perspective? But what is that actually going to lead to? Because I think we've become as a society so enamored by the idea of tax cuts, it buys votes. And it's a clever way politically to kind of posture and to look, like you're doing a great thing. But what I care about is what does that actually deliver? So coming back to your question, yeah, I think we do need to make changes on CGT. I think we should probably, and look, I'm not an expert in this space, but I put my thinking cap on it. We probably need to look at a tiered model because someone who has 50 or 100 properties, should they be taxed in the same way? That's a mum and dad investor who's got one additional property that they've used to supplement, early retirement strategies.
No.
Similarly, someone who's on $190,000, should they be taxed at the same tax rate as someone who's earning $1 million, $5 million, 10 million, 100 million, $1 billion a year? I don't think that they should. And the Oxfam report that's recently come out has shown that if we tax billionaires only a tiny percent more, and when you're a billionaire, it's all just zeros. Like, I don't think if you tax them a tiny bit more, they're not going to lay awake at night thinking, how am I going to pay my food bill because we've taxed you, 1% more or 5% more. You have thousands of millions of dollars. Like, what a crisis and problem to have to deal with. If we only tax them a few percent more, it would generate something like $17 billion of revenue annually for the Australian government. That is more than funding the NDIS in Australia. That is potentially so much, social housing, which we have underinvested in for successive governments, as you say, for decades and decades. That is without thinking about, fossil fuel taxes. I think we really need a whole of system review here, because what has got us to here is not going to get us to there. And we're already seeing that. And people of Australia are screaming, but no one in charge seems to be doing much about it other than sort of getting into rooms, feeling clever and kind of tinkering on the edges, which is driving me mad.
Yeah. And so let's bring it back down then to a bit more granular, because something that we can, because that's always the argument, right? Is it the society or the individual? What comes first? And I think that's what's to bring me to sort of your fourth chapter, which is shed, which is letting go of shame and perfectionism to make space for helpful money habits. How, with the system that we have, because it is going to take many years to break it up, there is going to take political will that at the moment, let's be honest, isn't there. We've got a very conservative decision maker as a prime minister, and I think that's a fair comment to make. They aren't going to move the dial in the next 2 to 3 years. Take me through why, particularly, I think those first two, shame and protectionism in mindset, leads to so many issues in the end around creating money habits.
Yeah, because I think, and the whole reason that I did the chapter called Dirt inside the book was I wanted to show people you are playing in a dirty space. Yeah. And I wanted to show people the system is not necessarily set up for you, but we are not going to wait for that system to change before we do something, because goodness me, like, how we would be waiting. I mean, look at wage equality. They're projecting that to be hundreds and hundreds of years from actually, hitting parity. Like, we don't got time. We don't got time to be waiting for the people in charge to actually do their job correctly. And this is all sides of government. I'll bash any side of government that I feel is appropriate to do so on the day. So I think what we have internalized from so many different areas, particularly for women, is A, money is not the domain for you. B, you should have, these very voyeuristic ideals of what is important, and we idolize poverty for women. Actually, if you look at really into childhood, you look at the heroes. They are often these women who lived in servitude, who came from nothing, and the idea is to be righteous. But goodness me, you don't want to be like those evil people who are rich. So we have told women specifically, I think, for a really long time, that the domain of money is not for them. And we've, through all of this pop culture, we've really rusted on that narrative. Couple that with the fact that we don't learn formally much, if anything, about money at school. Most parents didn't teach their children anything, if not, probably what not to do with money. And so it's really easy to understand how very quickly you can layer this thinking on that I'm not good at this. This doesn't feel right for me. I don't know if I'm meant to be here. I'm so scared I'm going to muck it up. I don't want to do the wrong thing, because doing it, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it perfectly. And so we stay quiet and we stay, stuck. And with the system that is racing ahead, particularly from an inequality perspective, we are feeling and falling further and further behind. And I want people to understand that the system is one thing, and what you internalize and what you choose to do within the power and realm of your control is your decision.
So on that decision, because that's also something that we know is very hard, decision inertia, actual inertia, everyone's different. I think I want to put that out there before I ask you this question. Completely understand that, you're not going to have the number one answer to every part of this, but what are your views about, first of all, getting out of that sort of perfectionism, but changing the habit to actually start taking the steps forward?
Yeah. So within the book, I talk about this idea of, creating a kind of a superhero for yourself, like an alter ego. And it sounds ridiculous until you read the research that shows actually there's some science behind this. What we often focus on, and I love neuroscience. I haven't decided yet in my next life if I'm coming back as an economist or a neuroscientist, but
Trying to
hopefully,
come back as a economist. You can tell that from personal point of view.
yeah, okay,
You don't
okay,
want
good. Well, there we are. She's coming back as a neuroscientist. Um,
you're much better at it.
Thank you. Um, we're constantly focusing on goals, and do not get me wrong, goals are so important, particularly in this environment where you got to fight and you got to fight hard and you got to know why what you're fighting for. But what we forget is that we've actually got to adopt the identity or the habits. And James Clear talks about this a lot, of what would someone who achieves those goals actually do? So if I want to run a marathon, I would probably have to learn to run. I'd probably eat healthier. I'd probably get more sleep. I would have all of these things that I would be like, okay, cool. If I want to do this thing, if that's the goal, I want to complete a marathon, I need to actually think about habitually what are those practices that I need to adopt. And we do this quite well in January. We get so overwhelmed because we're like, I'm becoming this whole new evolved being, and we give up. And so, I think start with who is the identity of the person that you want to become with money? How would they respond to the everyday calamities of your life and the chaos that you exist in? Let's not pretend that this superhero that's coming to save you, which is also you, is living in this perfect world that has no competing priorities, that's never tired, that never wants to watch TV after work instead of doing the thing. If they had exactly the same challenges as you, what are they doing instead? And then I think it's about just adopting one habit, because I am someone who likes to go from 0 to a million. I'm not very good at in the middle. And I've had to learn, okay, Jess, it is okay to not absolutely overwhelm yourself and your nervous system, one step at a time. What is the one thing that I can build into the practice this week? And I've got a weekly goals coach. And so, we're always looking at those 1% things, because even though they seem almost a nuisance, but B, inconsequential, like, does this even matter in the long run? The aggregation of these marginal gains in 12 months' time, you are going to look and feel so different. And we can by then rewire our brain so that what once was hard, and change is bloody hard, now becomes our go-to pattern. But trying to flood our system and do it all at once is where people, in my experience, often give up, because they've put too much pressure on themselves to do everything. And then they're angry at themselves, and then they internalize, I can't do this. I've just proven to myself I can't do this. This is too much. This is too complicated. I don't get it. I can't be bothered. Instead of going, if I took 15 minutes this week, what's one thing that I could do to move the needle? What is the tiniest thing that I could do just so I can prove to myself, actually, bitch, you can do this. You've got this. And on the other side, we've not made the mountain so high that we want to give up halfway through. Instead, we're riding that dopamine wave of, I did it. Who cares that it was that I, did one tiny thing? I bloody did it. Now next week, what next? And we become excited by the idea of progress instead of overwhelmed by the tasks that sit in front of us.
Dopamine is one to pick up on there, which is the flip side of dopamine. Obviously, it is a stimulant. It is something that gives you euphoria. We know that when you get onto dopamine and get into the dopamine cycle, it can lead to bad habits. Talk to me about the other side of dopamine, particularly with spending, because it is very linked to it. It is an attraction. It definitely gives you that boost that you're just talking about. How do you get across? Because I completely agree with you. It's the old, the old adage of 1% makes, all 1% lead to 100%. How do you deal with the flip side? How do you deal with the spending problem that comes with dopamine, that comes with the habit of here and now, and that, as you said, that system that is baked in to keep us attracted to the negative way of dealing with money than the positive?
So a few things. Firstly, I'm a dopamine addict, and I mean that quite sincerely because I'm neurodivergent. So my brain is always looking for external dopamine because my brain doesn't make enough of it. If you are neurodivergent too, or someone you know or love is, I do talk about in the book my experience being neurodivergent, because we cannot, understate how much that can derail your money if you too are constantly looking for quests for dopamine externally. Secondly, you need to remember that the system has been designed for maximum dopamine hits. So those people who have, set the algorithms, those people that are trying to get you to buy, those people are very clever people who have figured out how they can literally hack into your brain to get an outcome that they are looking for. It is why you say to yourself, I'll just watch one more dog video on social media. And then suddenly you look at your clock and go, oh my God, it's 11:30. Where did the last hour and a half go? You know, it's actually really scary because we've been set up to, um, you know, become addicted to these things that ultimately often do not align with the habits that we want, and they often don't align to the financial goals that we have. And so what I talk about in the book is understanding your patterns. So when are you most at risk of self-sabotage, and clearly articulating them to yourself and getting a really clear picture of, okay, cool, if this thing happens, I normally respond in this particular way. So I had a bad day at work. I normally come home and next thing I know, I'm trying to figure out whether I want express delivery or normal delivery for something that I didn't even know existed 5 minutes ago. Or I've had a fight with my partner. I want to go and, buy something. We know from the research that people purchase in highly emotive moments, both men and women. Stress, anger, all those things, they do lead to purchasing decisions. We often like to pretend that it's women who only purchase in those moments. It's actually all of us. And so remembering that the system is designed to pry money from your hands to make those people more money and you less of it, it's then about going, I see you for what you are. I am going to play right back at you, and I'm going to create what I call a $0 given list. And the idea is, let's figure out for you what are easy dopamine providing hacks that do not cost you money, that are not going to derail your plans, that are not going to keep you further and further from your goal, that are going to actually fill your cup and not make you feel like you A, have just robbed yourself because you purchased something, or B, that you've just wasted time. You can feel that remorse, because you didn't do the thing that you said you were going to do to yourself. Let's actually not pretend that we're never going to be a human who has temptation, because Shakespeare has proven we haven't evolved that much. But why can't we just give you things that we know you love, and let's arm you for your next moment so that you are prepared, and that by the time that you finish doing the thing on your $0 given list, you're happier than you would have ever been with another thing that's just going to gather dust in your cupboard. And you're more aligned to what is important to you and what you want to achieve.
Going to go a little bit off topic with you there because I want to pick up on something you've highlighted, and I think it needs to be deeper, considering I understand the irony of the question I'm about to ask you, because we are both sitting on a podcast that will get posted up on social media. But social media is another part of that dopamine hit. You talked about the algorithm. You talked about how that impact is there. Have you got any thoughts, feelings, ideas, structure, research about how to just deal with where social media will derail your future goals, will derail your money future? Because it is such a dopamine attractor. It has clearly got some positive benefits. It allows connection, but its negativity is absolutely tapped into it. How do you take social media with regards to where it's ended up today?
Yeah, I think it's really scary. And it feels to me that the idea that once we wanted to share, photos with our family and close friends, of what we, I don't know, ate for dinner the night before, or whatever we were posting back when it sort of came out, has been hijacked by capitalism. And make no mistake about it, this app might be free to you, but it is not free. There are billions of dollars that are pumped into this system every day so that you are tempted to buy. And what it also does is helps reinforce the ideals that you are not enough yet. Let us show you who these perfect people are with their perfect houses and their perfect influency behaviors. And I think it really taps into this very deep-seated fear and insecurity of, am I enough? Will I be enough after this next purchase? We get very consumed by this idea. And I think more and more people obviously, are aware that this is someone's facade and it's a veneer and it's not real life, but it still can, erode our confidence and our identity. And we wrap the consumer level. It's like, well, don't worry, shop now, click here, and you can have the thing and you can be as great and wonderful. So I think, human beings for, forever have always had fears and worries and doubts and insecurities. But what we haven't been living in is some sort of bizarre Truman Show, like scenario where the shop is literally next to us in bed or, beside us on the lounge saying, I can fix this for you. Just click here and everything will be okay. And then we rinse and repeat over and over and over again because we're constantly thinking, why hasn't that worked? What next? And so, I have huge fears looking at the data on how much people are using buy now, pay later services, how much people are using credit cards and bad debt to fuel essential costs, how many people are ripping out something out of their budget that they once assumed were essential costs while simultaneously telling me I've got a shopping addiction that I can't get rid of. And it may be the first time that they've said it not only to me, but to themselves as well. And people think people with shopping addictions must have rooms and rooms and rooms full of, the postman must be coming, multiple times a day. But actually, it doesn't always need to look like that. It doesn't need to be to the tune of thousands of dollars every week. It can be this idea that I need a quick fix. I need a sugar rush hit. And that is how I'm band-aiding my emotions. I'm spending my emotions to try to become the person that I want to be. And yet ultimately what it often does for a lot of people is it veers them further and further off course from who they actually are and who they are, wanting to step more and more into.
I'm going to read chapter 7 then, which is your seed chapter. Building a conscious cash flow plan that feeds your goals and seeds your future. That's your opening line that you've got on it.
Yes.
I think it's fascinating because the other thing with exactly what you've just said, the ways to get around it is also the system, right? Which is to actually start looking at when you seed, you automate, you actually multiply your account setups, you multiply your automated system to override your emotion. Take me through how you can actually use the system in your benefit for a positive way, which is seeding yourself with automation to get away from the emotion that can lead to spending.
Yeah. And so whilst, there are many parts of the system that I'd like to burn to the ground and start again, there are many parts of the system that are so beneficial, and they're often the ones that we're not using. These are, the banking and cash flow automations that we can talk about. These are automations on investment platforms. This is about reinvesting dividends, like rounding up your coffee and starting investing. Like there's a lot of automations that exist today to help us. And so from a system perspective, we've got to use them to our advantage. So what I say to people is get out of your own way. Get out of your own way. Let's make something that is simple, that is easy, that is clear, and that gives you freedom within boundaries. I am not someone that would ever sit down and reconcile every single cent that I spend. You might be. Brilliant. Love that if you love that. But most people would rather pull their teeth out than actually trying to reconcile. Did I have one coffee? Did I have two coffee? Oh my God, I had two coffees yesterday. Does that mean I can't have a coffee tomorrow? Ridiculous. Instead, it's about saying, let's figure out which areas of your life are important. How much do we need to fund into these areas? Let's set up bank accounts, give them a name, give them a purpose, automate the bejesus out of our life. Then all we need to focus on is having weekly amounts of money drip fed to us, because that is ideally the way that we don't move into feast and famine with our spending and our behaviors with money. And then my only job is to figure out how the hell do I get maximum joy from this money that's being allocated to me. That's my one job. Everything else should be taken care of. This is assuming you have consistency of income. How do I get maximum joy from that money? And you need to gamify it. Do not spend time moving money from account A to account B. You don't got time for that. No one's got time for that. Why would you do that when a robot can do it quite successfully, perfectly every damn time? Use your time to learn how to grow your money, learn how to make more money. Do not use your time doing BS administrative tasks that a system can do for you. So I think it's about breaking up with your banking system, because people seem really wedded to the bank that they are with and how their bank account structure is set up. It's almost like this personal failure. If I say to people, let's try to make some evolution here, people are quite like, oh no, I'm quite comfortable with what I got, thanks. I'm like, let's just trial this. Yeah, let's try it for 3 months. And if you hate me and you hate it, send it back again. And then after 3 months, people are like, holy shit, I can't believe I didn't do this sooner. It sounds so silly, but it's like revolutionized my life. I'm like, it sounds silly, but if you do it properly, it'll take away so much stress. It'll make you feel like you have so much more control, and it'll really help you go, thank you, but no thank you, to the things that are not within your budget and that are not going to give you your long-term goal. I'm not ripping into my, early retirement investment portfolio or my, Sri Lanka holiday fund to buy this BS thing. No, I would rather go on this holiday. But if you don't know what you're fighting for, it makes it really bloody easy to tap into money and then to figure out or to ask yourself, why am I going round and round in circles? Can I tell you a story?
Go for it.
2 minutes before we clicked go on this podcast, I'm a frugal lass. You'll know that if you've read the book. I have been following this amazing brand for so long. They're called Kester Black, and I'm not sponsored by them at all. And I've been looking at their lipsticks. And so I have a bit of a quote unquote hit list of brands that I've like checked out, things that I want to buy, but I'm so not interested in buying on the same day because I know that that's what they're trying to get me to do. Anyway, I have been following them and they had a clearance sale of their seconds. She loves a 60% off price tag. I was like, great. This is a brand that I have literally on my list. So I keep a list of brands that I want to buy stuff from. I don't know if I'm going to like these colors. So I'm going to buy them 60% off. I bought them at $15 each. I think they're like $50 each or something, normally. And so that reward for me was A, I got the thing that I want, but B, I got more of it because my money went further and she got a discount. Like that made me so much happier than just, oh, I'll buy the thing that I didn't even know I wanted or needed or, that it even existed in the world and then just sits in a drawer. The reward, it's like I don't know if your parents ever used to use, it's the opposite of Afterpay. I'm having a mind blank, where you would go and you'd pay it off and then lay-by.
The old school way.
Do you remember how exciting it was to go in and I don't know about you, but my parents would like pay off a little bit of money and then they would write down, okay, you're one step closer. And I'm like, we're nearly there. And then to go and pick them up. I mean, they were normally like flannel pajamas. And I was like, oh my God, we've made it. The joy and excitement that I got from, flannel pajamas because I watched the journey and the progress. It was so much more exciting than if mum had just come home and went, I bought you new pajamas. I'd have been like, okay.
Also better from the point of view that it smooths out your money flow, right? So I still deliberately use a lay-by setup to smooth out cash flow, right? So if I need something, it still works. This is what, when I'm going to get my personal sort of be in my bonnet, buy now, pay later is the biggest spam hack I've seen in decades. When it first came out, and I'm not going to name names because it's easy to work out who I'm talking about here, they were selling buy now, pay later as the lay-by of the now and the future, right? It was credit for kids. That's exactly what it was. It was credit for kids. There was not only that, it circumnavigated so many rules and regulations around credit checks, application checks, know your clients, AML, anti-money laundering. It didn't have to do 100 points of ID check because it was this new thing. It was literally credit for kids. And they were selling it as the new world lay-by. You pay 4 easy payments, just like you could have done with lay-by, where you'd go in 4 times to pay it off. The difference was you got it now. Well, that's credit. That's straight out credit. And I remember raging in 2013 through 17 when buy now, pay later really went through the roof. Australia was the leader of it. We actually basically invented it. And it just got me so angry that those that were using lay-by were actually doing habits and having scenarios that were actually really good for cash flow management. It's really, really good because it smooths out that big hit. If you do unfortunately need to go through and have your car serviced or whatever it is, you could lay-by that back in the day. I'm going to do it on X date in the future. I'm going to start paying small incremental payments today before I get my car serviced. Right, it really develops some good behaviors, particularly in boomers. Boomers are really good with it. So I love your story, and I get it completely because, it gets there. I'm going to move forward because I realize we're running out of time because I want to get your views on super. And I know looking at what you've put in your grow chapter, superannuation is a fascinating one because you're clearly about optimizing it, but you do also have some problems with it. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I do. I really struggled to talk about superannuation because, the publishers really wanted me to make this a global book for the global sensation that no doubt it will become. But it's really hard because when you work in a system like Australia, which is quite nuanced and technical, and we've got one of the most sophisticated / complicated retirement systems globally, I felt that I would be doing it and my readers a disservice by not actually talking about some of the things that exist within the system and the structure that we live in. Like very simply, superannuation was designed for someone who works full-time, for someone who takes no breaks from the workforce and retires at retirement age. Who does that sound like?
Middle-aged white guy.
Yeah, it was like, this is not an attack on men. This is an attack on the fact that we didn't have anyone in the room sitting back and going, that's an interesting way to do it, my friends, because there's quite a large proportion of people, you may know them as women, who tend to take time in and out of the workforce. And when they return to work, they often do it in a part-time capacity. And actually, looking at these ABS lifetime, life expectancy tables, it appears that these proportion of people actually outlive their male friends. Are we not worried in any way, shape, or form that designing a system like this only for this particular type of person is going to create ginormous wealth inequality on the other side? Said no one ever, clearly in the 90s when they were designing this. It was only a few years ago that we started actually making compulsory superannuation contributions over a certain monthly income threshold. And so before that, you didn't have any money necessarily going into super if you were under those thresholds. And so we are now seeing the fallout of this, where women who have often stepped back and done unpaid work at home, living their older years in a high risk of poverty, homelessness, you know, it's not a retirement goal. Having helped thousands of people with their money, I've never, ever had anyone say to me that that's what they aspire to have in retirement. And yet the system, which is actually a very sophisticated system, has totally ignored a huge proportion of people in Australia. I don't think that that's fair.
Yep, I'd have to agree with you. I mean, the concept of it is very good. The idea that it's trying to take pressure off the pension scheme, self-funding yourself, having your financial freedom into the future, you're dead right. But you're also highlighting the massive, massive problems that come with it is inconsistencies. Not only that, the new one that I get really bee in my bonnet, the changes to the personal income tax for the lowest tax bracket at the end of next year is 14%. What's their superannuation taxed at? 15%. What's the incentive to actually save for their future by putting more money into super? It's not there. So again, there are so many nuances with it. Final thing before I get to my last question, because I want to keep going because this is a fascinating topic. Talk to me about financial shit planning.
Financial what?
Shit planning, which is one of your books that you've got there, your winter planning for financial shitstorms.
Oh, shit planning. I thought you were talking about advice. I was like, no, financial advice is amazing if you can afford it.
No.
Financial shitstorms. Yeah. So it would be remiss of me to think that we live in a world that is full of rainbows and, unicorns and all the things. And, throughout the book, what I hope people will take is that everyone has some version of financial winter come at them. And I am so grateful for the people throughout the book who shared their stories. They are incredibly, I mean, I say that my stories are vulnerable. What some people shared through the Money in the Wild profiles, which are, people in my community, they did not hold back, I don't think, in terms of, what they have endured or witnessed when it comes to money, many sort of these winters. So it is one thing to look at how do we grow your money, but it would be completely remiss of me to not then teach people how do you protect yourself simultaneously, because you can do all of this amazing work on your habits, your cash flow, starting to invest, move yourself forward. And it only takes one thing to come out of left field to absolutely knock your money world sideways. Is there a way that we can create a shelter for you to at least try to buffer you as much as possible from whatever that financial shitstorm is? And look, I give my own story in there about what was a relatively full-on a health shitstorm that turned into a financial, not a shitstorm, probably like a grateful moment, but it would have been a hell of a big shitstorm if I didn't have some of the things in place that I had. And so winter is coming for all of us. I don't know exactly when it's going to land on your lap. I don't know exactly what version of a storm you are going to have. I don't know how long the wild weather is going to hang around for, but I do know what are the basic and simple things that you can do absolutely right now to at least safeguard yourself as best as possible for when that time comes.
So on that, putting all of what we've just discussed for the last 40 minutes, I'm going to ask you the question I ask everyone, which is, Jess Brady, if you're in charge for just one day, what would you do?
I've thought actually about this because I'm waiting for the moment for Albo to call me and be like, Jess, you're up. You got a day's work with me. Let's go. I would create a fossil fuel tax. I would tax billionaires more. I would invest more in social housing. I would look at the aged care system, because I think that has had some recent changes that is wildly unfair. And the health system, I would look at NDIS and fix that, because remember, we now got billions and billions of dollars because we're taxing wealthy people more. and taxing fossil fuel companies more. I would put a tier on our income brackets. I would tier capital gains tax. I would make it so capital gains tax cannot offset your work income. So much more of that tax wealth, not work vibe. I would do a lot more around animal welfare. I think we have horrific animal welfare laws in Australia. And as a dog mum, I think we need to do a lot of work on that. So I just like sneak that in there probably before morning tea. I would look at whether the money that we have, if we've got any money left in the kitty, how do we make it fairer from an education perspective, be it from childcare all the way up to university, so that children, young people in Australia today are entering the workforce riddled with debt. And I just don't think that that's the best shot at life. I would also invest in entrepreneurship and innovation. We do a shit job at producing great innovators in Australia on a global scale. We're smart people, but we get stuck in a really hard system. And if there was any time left, what else would I do? Train people for the next, give money for training for the next wave of work that we're going to have, because those coders from 5 years ago are now understanding that coding might not be their career choice from here on in.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd probably need a little bit of a nap and I'd come up with my next plan. But that's
a big 24 hours.
Yeah, but you know what? I wouldn't have any of these bloody round tables. I would do ScoMo. I'd captain's call it. I'll be like, you know what? I'm coming in with a sledgehammer. I don't need a round table where you all just pontificate how smart you are. We've got to get real change real fast, and we can do it, and it can really benefit Australians. Like, look at some of the happiest places in the world. They might get taxed more, which is a hard thing to sit with, but what they get for that is free healthcare, free childcare, free university, social housing for life. Like there's some really incredible social benefits. And this is when people start calling me a communist and a socialist and all of these bizarre labels. I'm like, actually, if we know that this leads to the highest well-being index of any population globally, why don't we want that for our people? So yeah, if you could just organize a day where I can get in there
and do that, absolutely.
I'm all about it.
Jess Brady, congratulations on the book, and thank you so much for joining Exchanges.
Thank you so much for having me.
Big thank you to Jessica on an incredible story. She's very, very open, as you can hear, very, very passionate also about what she does. And that's why I love having her on. It was a fantastic talk, but also big, big congratulations for what is a brilliant book as well. If you haven't had a look, please go and check out Jessica's website. And if you can, get along and grab one of those books as well. To you out there, as always, thank you so much for watching, listening, or doing whatever it is in between. Don't forget, only about a third of you have actually subscribed to the channel. So please, wherever you're watching or listening, please click that subscribe button. And even if you can, give us a bit of a ratings as well. We do have an email. It's exchanges@everlucas.com.au. If you want to find out any more about the episode, or if you've got ideas, guests, or anything else that you want us to discuss in the program. Until next week, thank you so much as always for being Exchanges, and I'll talk to you then.